Welcome to Let's Chew the Gum. I'm your host, Protkall. We're talking about a lot of things in this show while we chew the gum. And as always, on each and every show, we always have
something for your mind, something for your mind, something for your mind,
정신을 집어넣으세요. 어떤 것 필요합니까?
something for your
정신을 집어넣으세요.
mind,
정신을 집어넣으세요.
something for your
Welcome back to this edition of Let's Chew the Gum. I'm your host, Protkall. This is Let's Chew the Gum, the podcast where we talk about everything from A to Z. Today we have a special show that's being recorded actually after midnight. Normally we don't record this late, but these are unusual times. My guest today is Ruthemma Rush, a K-2 special ed teacher in Southern California in the Redlands Unified School District. She's also been a French and Spanish teacher with some interesting programs for students. Today we're going to be discussing distance learning for the younger kids, and we're going to have hopefully an insightful conversation that you'll enjoy. So let me just go ahead and bring to you Ruthemma Rush. Hi, Ruthemma. How are you?
I'm doing great, except the fact that I'm still awake.
Still awake? Yeah. We're both still awake, and I'm calling this, sort of the Cinderella episode because it's near midnight. We're not going to expire or turn into pumpkins and things like that, but hopefully this will be a glass slipper episode. You like how I slipped that in there, Cinderella, glass slipper. No, anyway.
I hope so. I hope we find the right fit for all of our listeners.
Absolutely. No, I'm sure that they will enjoy it because this topic of distance learning, as you know, many folks have done this for a long time, but for many of our teachers, not just here in California, but across the nation and perhaps the world, this is the first time that they're engaging in this type of activity because it's not the same as being in the classroom. There's so many aspects that individuals are discovering each day that we need to adjust for and to be flexible with. And so it's really interesting. I've heard lots of conversations from people talking about how do we do this when we're doing this over the computer for younger children, because oftentimes it's the parents that we'll be interacting with. But even more so, how do we provide a semblance of the education that we would in our classrooms when it comes to younger students who are in special education? And since you are a special ed teacher, I'm glad that you had a chance to call into the show to give some insight. So let's just start there. How do we do that?
Well, there's a lot of issues we have to consider. I mean, with special education, there's always the legal implications, which are so important for our families, and we have to navigate all of this uncertainty at this moment when we don't know exactly what the district's requiring, what the state's requiring, what the legal expectations are. And thankfully, there are so many intelligent people who are working really hard right now. Our unions are working overtime. Our state, representatives everybody is putting their heads together to try to make some sense out of what's going on right now. And I've gotten a lot of clarifications. There have been a lot of great webinars. There's just a lot of information out there. So I think the difficult part is sorting out all of the different information sources and putting it all together into our own individual lives, because so many of us are mothers, so many of us have kids at home, and we have to try to do all of this at the same time as taking care of our families. So I want to shout out to Governor Newsom, because he just said something really sweet about how he was thankful that, all of us are working so hard. And so I appreciate that, because it's rare that we get any kind of acknowledgement like that from public officials.
Sure, it definitely is a welcome addition to our profession. Not only the recognition from public officials, but the recognition that I'm hearing from parents who are in the position now of being sort of homeschool teachers, and they're getting a glimpse of what it looks like to teach various students all day. And it's not that it's so much unlike being a parent, but it's so different, and it's such a drastic change, because you're having, students at home who are seniors all the way down to first grade, and how do you manipulate that? How do you work that out? And it is also a welcome addition to see so many people coming together to cooperate to try to make this happen, right? A lot of the lines that usually, or not, I don't want to say usually, but lines that have divided educators and politicians and community folks, a lot of those have been dissolved, and people are just saying, look, we're in this together. Let's find solutions. So your point about all the webinars and the cooperation and people sharing resources, that's been a great thing, and I would say a necessary thing. I'm still just in awe of the whole situation, and especially again when it comes to special ed, as you said, there's so many things to consider. What are some ways or some plans that you have already in terms of how you're going to deliver content and to assess or try to emulate what it is you do in the classroom?
Well, I'm very lucky in that my district has decided to put all IEPs on hold for now. I know that throughout the state, that's not the case. A lot of people are still trying to hold IEPs and still trying to do all of that virtually, which I think is a mistake in a way, because, I know that they want to try to keep doing things as normal, but at the same time, you can't really assess students virtually. You can't get an accurate assessment through the computer with a kid who has social problems already. Most of my kids are autistic, and it's hard to even get them to say hello to me. Some of my kids don't even speak, hardly at all, unless I really am very patient, and it's going to be even harder to get them to talk to me on a computer. So I think that the idea of just waiting for now and holding everything as it is instead of trying to keep going as normal was a really smart decision on the part of my school district. And my parents seem to be okay with it. I've explained it to them, and they seem pretty fine with the fact that, okay, we'll just wait till the fall and figure it out then, and we'll just hold everything the way that it was before we went on our spring break. And so what we're doing, what I've been doing is I've been reaching out a lot to my parents. I've been calling them over the phone, which the district has told me is not mandatory, but I chose to do that, and I'm keeping a log of those phone calls because I want to make sure everyone's in touch with me. I don't want anyone to be slipping through the cracks. And I've been sending them a lot of messages through Class Dojo, which is my primary mode of communicating with parents. And they're probably getting sick of me at this point because I've been messaging them all the time. But it's just the only way that I can communicate with them right now.
Sure. No, I know a lot of students are welcoming the communication from teachers because it's been a jolt to their lives, whether they're in special ed or in a general ed classroom. Things are just so unusual. And a lot of students, as you know, just like adults, some of us, we rely on or we take comfort from our routines, and nothing about this is routine. Again, it's almost every day you're realizing that there's something new I need to do, or something I didn't think of, or maybe something I need to prepare for, or products or supplies I need for the home or the school that's happening. And to your point about the districts being patient, I've heard that a lot too. I've seen districts really reach out even to teachers to reassure them that, look, we know that this is not usual. We don't have the expectation that this is going to replace or completely replicate your classroom, but we're taking it step by step, and we're going to be in this together. And so that's very important. And to your point of it being difficult to assess students over the computer, Yeah, that's something, especially in a situation of a special ed classroom for younger children, because as you said, even within the classrooms, oftentimes there may not be a lot of communication or dialogue, and even less so now that it's on the computer. So, that's a great start. What about have you or your district, or have you heard stories of how parents are being supplied with maybe assistive technologies in the home, or other resources to help and aid them during this time?
Well, they are being offered a laptop, one per family. They will be able to go pick it up in a drive-through line next Friday. I think it's wonderful that we have the resources to do that. As you're from Detroit, you may know kids in Detroit don't get stuff like that. They barely have books or paper. My family lives in Michigan, and my aunt lives near Detroit, and they know that the situation there is much, much worse than it is here. We are so fortunate in my little area where we are. We have so many resources. I don't know what kind of resources they have in Los Angeles. I shudder to think about all the kids that are being just completely left off the grid because they might be homeless, or they might be in a situation where they don't have access to their basic, safe needs, or families where there's, 10, 15 people living in a tiny little apartment in inner cities. So my heart goes out to those families and those teachers, because they are struggling so much more than I am. I'm so fortunate that my kids have really wonderful family situations. Their parents are working really hard, and I know that they're going to be okay. So, I'm in a really good place compared to some other people.
Yeah, definitely. It definitely is all relative. I was speaking with a colleague just the other day about that, the equity issues of this. And later on this week, in an upcoming podcast, we're going to have a couple of guests where we're going to talk about this issue of equity. And you're right. There's some areas, again, Detroit and just so many areas. I mean, we couldn't even name them that are not prepared for this in terms of providing resources for the homes, or rural areas where there's not sufficient internet access. And I just I think it's also great that some of the companies, the tech companies, are coming out offering free resources, and some of the districts providing hotspots for students that don't have Wi-Fi service, because again, this is unprecedented in our lifetime, and so the response that's coming forth and the ways that we're going about it, I think on the other end of this, whenever that is, this has definitely been great for preparing for that. How do we ensure equity and access for all students? If one laptop per family, it's a start. But if you have families where there's 5, even 2, 3, 4, 5 kids or more that are going to schools in the district, and one per family, I mean, it's a start, but it's an indication that we may have to prepare ourselves to do more.
Well, it's more than kids in other parts of the world are definitely getting. But I also think that we have to be really creative. I know that some principals or some districts might really frown on this, but I went out on a limb and I printed off a bunch of workbooks and materials and hand-delivered it to my students. I felt like I had to, because some of them don't have computers at home, and they're not going to get a computer until next Friday. And that's 2 weeks where they're sitting at home with their moms and dads going, what am I supposed to do all day? So I wanted to give them something, something physical that they could do. And so I was very cautious. I used gloves. I was very careful. I gave them art supplies. I gave them paints. I gave them paper. I gave them pencils. I just wanted to make sure they had something. And I know that this isn't possible if you're, for example, if you're a high school or a middle school teacher and you have 150 students or something like that, there's no way you're going to be able to do something like what I did. But I'm just that's an example of how we gotta think outside the box. You might have paraeducators or assistants or somebody else in your family that can help you do something. Our school is trying to plan we're going to get bags of groceries and decorate the bags, and we're going to be very safe about it all, but we were thinking of ways that we could just reach out to the families. So now's a time when we've got to use every crazy idea we can think of to do something, because I don't see how else we're going to address the need if we don't start thinking outside the box.
Absolutely. Drastic times calls for, thinking outside of the box and some very creative measures. And good for you for doing that. I know that there are districts where I've heard that principals are offering to print out materials for teachers to hand out to students, because teachers are not allowed to go in there. There's so much protocol that has to be considered when using the printer and wearing the gloves and touching the parts and the paper, et cetera, et cetera. So they're just not allowing teachers to do that. And but they are volunteering to print it for them, and they are coming together in creative ways, as you said, to whether it's to provide meals for the families or services that students may be needing. So really good for you, because 2 weeks can be a long time for individuals to get out of a routine. I was listening to some athletes talk about just a short period of time, how a team could get out of sync in terms of their ability to work as a unit, for success. And I know that with students, a routine is essential. And now when we're talking about students with special needs, definitely when the routine is broken, that can be traumatic. And so as much as we can, we need to address that.
Yeah, especially when you're talking with kids who have autism, because kids on the spectrum, they rely on their routines, and I've seen it. I change one little video that I show that they're used to me showing it every day the same. If I try to change it, I have one little guy, he just goes crazy. It's like his world is collapsing on him. And what's happening right now is like times a million for him. Thankfully, he's at home with his family, so it's okay. But he's probably having a really hard time, as are all of the students who are used to their routines. And it's not easy for anybody, but especially for kids on the spectrum. I mean, they are already having a hard time with social interactions, and for them to be deprived of social contact, that's the main thing they need to practice. That's the main reason why they need to be in school. They need to learn how to talk to other people, how to be with other kids. And they can't learn that at home with their families all by themselves.
Right, absolutely. And just to think of, the different dynamics that those students may be in, and by that I mean, of course, I don't know this, but I would imagine that there are some students who are in isolation right now, and maybe they have a variety of individuals that they can engage with, whether it be siblings or cousins or family members. And there may be others who are in single parent homes, or maybe they're the only child. And so there's going to be so many different levels of interaction that these students are able to have. And I imagine that it's that way even prior to this social isolation that we have. But the fact remains that, when students are in a program and they have their IEPs, and teachers and the aides and assistants are addressing the issues and the needs that the students have, those routines help those students to develop and to progress. And like you said, without it, it's just remarkable. And in this situation, we can only do what we can do. So I'm just thankful for everybody in the field of education and just in general. I mean, that doesn't exclude anyone else who's working right now to help this along. But since we're talking about education, I'm just so grateful for the people that are stepping up and, as you said, thinking outside the box and finding innovative ways to engage and to help.
Me too. I'm very grateful, and I definitely don't feel alone at all. There's a huge community of teachers that are doing exactly what I'm doing right now, and they're all amazing. But that gets us to the question of what can we do right now? What can we do to give our students some sort of continuity, some sort of routine? So what I'm planning on doing for my students is having a daily check-in every day. And I know some districts are requiring more time on the computer, more FaceTime, more Google Meets or Hangouts or Zoom or whatever their platforms they're using. But I plan to do something every single day. And I know all my students will not be able to do that. I know some students are in daycare or their parents work nights. I have parents who are working at the hospital on the front lines in Loma Linda. And I have already told them how much I appreciate what they're doing. And I don't expect them to do everything. I just want to provide things, and I think that's what we can do. So we can offer things, we can give resources, we can provide Meets or Zoom or whatever platform at a specified time. And if they can get there and do it, that's great. If not, I'm going to record it and I'll provide them the links and they'll be able to access it later on. But we've got to get those links, those information, those websites. We have to get that stuff out there. And then, if they can't do it, then they can't do it.
Absolutely. You're listening to Let's Chew the Gum, the podcast where we talk about everything from A to Z. You can find this podcast on Anchor, Spotify, YouTube, Spreaker, Podchaser, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. There's so many social platforms. I'd like to invite you to reach out if you'd like to be a guest on the show, such as our guest today, Ruthemma Rush, or if you have a topic, email us at letschewthegum@gmail.com or at protkall@gmail.com. That's protkall@gmail.com. We're going to take a quick break for our sponsors, and we'll be right back.
Something for your mind.
Please mind the gap.
Something for your mind.
무엇인가 정신에 집어넣으세요.
If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It's free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it could be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and many more. You can make money from your podcast also with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. So what are you waiting for? Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.
Thank you for listening to our sponsors. We're back with Ruthemma Rush, K-2-Special Ed teacher in the Redlands Unified School District, and we've been talking about distance learning for the younger kids. Ruthemma is a K-2 special ed instructor, and we're so glad to have her on the show today to discuss issues related to distance learning in the younger folks. And right now, we want to focus on really what are some practical solutions that we may address or that we see or that we can implement. And because you're the special ed teacher, I'm going to sit back and listen to you talk about that.
Well, I think there's a lot we can do behind the scenes as far as communication. We need to make sure that we're staying in touch with other teachers, with our grade level teams. I know there's a lot of special ed teachers out there who don't have their own class, but who are push in or pull out support. And so we got to stay in touch with the other general education teachers. I know my particular class, half of my students are mainstreamed for at least half an hour, sometimes up to 2 or 3 hours a day, which is almost half or more. And so it's going to be on me to make sure that they're plugged into all the same resources as all the other general education students. Because as a special education teacher in a mild, moderate setting, which I am, I have to make sure I'm offering them the same curriculum as every other student. Now, if you're a mod severe special ed teacher, then you have your own, modified curriculum. So that's kind of a different situation. But now the big question is, how do we address those kids who can't read or who are so little that they can't use the technology on their own? That unfortunately relies a lot on the parents, and hopefully those parents are going to be able to, step in and help them out. But I think a lot of parents are willing to do that, and will find a way to do that somehow right now because they know how important it is. And so thank you to those parents who are taking that huge burden on right now in such a difficult time. I really can't imagine what that would be like. My kids are old enough that they know how to use the technology without a whole lot of guidance. And so it's just a huge thing that we're asking parents to do right now. And most of them are really willing to partner with us and to accept the fact that we don't know what we're doing either. And we're all working on this together as a team, which is very encouraging. But I think that the biggest thing that we can do is try to make things fun, because those kids need play-based education. In our classrooms, we're used to playing games. We're used to using puzzles. We're used to drawing pictures. We need to continue to do that in a different way. Use online computer programs if that's available to you. Use games, use videos, make it fun. I have a whole retinue of puppets, and I like to draw pictures. I'm going to use everything I can to make this fun for my students because they're little kids. That's how they learn. Their brains are engaged when they're having a good time. And we don't want them to be miserable, so we got to make it fun. We got to make it engaging, and we've got to make it interactive.
Absolutely. I think that's so important for our students because, they're going to need that support for their social, emotional learning as well. I mean, for some people, this is tragic in a lot of families. And if as much as we can normalize it or if it's just a few hours of the day that we can help students to be distracted from the noise that's going on about this virus and this new way of approaching life, I think that's going to go a long way. And that's for students of all ages. And I'd add to that even the adults, whether they're teachers or parents, right? None of us are experts in this because it's so new. And so we, as you said, reaching out to other teachers for the support academically for the students you have in common, but also reaching out to those teachers just to make sure that, they're feeling okay, that they're okay, because I think if we can help those teachers with their mindsets, right, and any type of stressors that they have, it's going to equip them to be even more prepared, I'd say, to assist the other kids. And also I think for us as teachers, it helps us to normalize a bit of our lives when we can get back to engaging with our students. Oftentimes you hear about, teachers wanting to have a day off or students not wanting to go to school. Well, now I'm seeing the opposite. I'm hearing students talk about how they want to get back into school, right? I'm hearing teachers saying, I can't wait to get back with my students in the classroom. And to be honest, I actually hear teachers say that all the time, even during summer break. I can't wait to get back to my students, right? We all need a break, but I think we're all in education because we love it. And so those things are important to stay in touch. I want to touch upon another thing that you spoke about, an aspect you spoke of. You said the parents. I'd imagine that at some point, if it's not happening now, I know there's lots of newsletters that are going out, but maybe some trainings for parents, whether it's videos or webinars where they can, get a crash course on teaching or pedagogy, delivery of instruction, some supports there, because it may be difficult. And again, we don't know what the situation is with parents at home. Some may have to still be working and their kids are home and they're needing a babysitter. Everything is so dynamic that there's no one solution that's going to cover everything. So the idea of supporting, being in touch and doing a needs assessment for teachers and parents, I think is going to go a long way.
Yeah, the parents have told me that they can't get a hold of anybody at the district because nobody's at their phones or at their desks. They don't know who to call. They don't know who to email. I'm their only point of contact with the school district. And so I'm becoming, the liaison between the administration, between the special ed department, I'm doing that job anyways, but even more so now. And I think parents do need a lot of training and education, but there's not a lot of time for them to devote to it if they're working or if they're stressed out. And so, as you said, the social emotional aspect is key and critical right now, and I think it's way more important than anything else. I think right now we should be focusing more on social emotional and mindfulness and just, trying to keep everybody focused on the present and not worrying. And that's a huge task. So I've actually asked my school counselor if she will come in once a week to talk to my students. And she's more than willing to do that. And so I think that's a huge component of what I do, is teaching my students how to appropriately handle what's happening, how to be more resilient. That's a lesson that will carry them throughout their lives. If they can, figure out how to breathe, how to find calm in their day amidst all the chaos of everything we're dealing with, that's something many adults can't do. So if I can teach my kids how to do that, that's huge. That's way more important than being able to do, double-digit subtraction.
Absolutely. Very important. It's something that you say that I too agree that is just as important, if not as important as the academic side. So much so, I teach at the university in a teacher training program, but I also teach high school. And one of the things that I began to adopt early in the year was a period of mindfulness each day. And some folks thought, isn't that, taking up too much time? Because maybe we may do 5 to 10 minutes of mindfulness activities where we're just quiet. Sometimes it's dark. There may be music or nature sounds, and we just breathe and we kind of release the tension from the day. And students really appreciated it, right? They really appreciated just that time to have to just sit back and breathe, to reassess, to turn off the noise, and then refocus. And what I found was that they were more productive. They were more engaged because they were able to clear out all the junk, all the noise, and just stresses from the day, whether it was at home or another class or relationships. I have seniors in high school or just whatever it may be. And so it went a long way. So that little bit of time that we took away from the class period, it paid dividends in terms of the amount of time that they were engaged and that their minds were clear to actually focus on the lessons that we had. And, I was thinking about my students during this time off, also about mindfulness and really knowing, because of the feedback that they give me, that they're missing that. And I hope that, as you said, those are skills that they can take with them. I hope that with all the practice that we've done, that they're still engaging in that and having just those minutes. I tell them, if it's just a couple of minutes in a day, a few times a day, that you can, just go into your quiet space and clear out the noise. So I hope that they're continuing that. So important.
Absolutely. And I think that the most important thing when we have any FaceTime with them, if we do on computer, that we need to encourage them to share how they're feeling and how they're doing before we move on to the academic pieces, because that's going to be a dynamic, as you said. It's going to be dynamic. It's going to change, and they all have different situations. They all have different issues, and we have been a constant in their lives since the beginning of the school year. We know our kids. They know us, and we have a relationship and a rapport with them. So we may be the one person that they might be able to talk to about certain things. And we have to continue to be that sense of stability and continuity for them right now more than ever.
Yeah, absolutely. That is so true. You know, I'm just sitting here, just as we're talking, just thinking about different scenarios. And I don't know if we talked about this before we came online or whatnot, but just students that may be homeless, students that are in just different situations that we have not considered. I know myself in high school, I was homeless for a period of time, and just thinking back to how would my life be if I had to keep up with my schoolwork. It was hard enough being homeless and going to school every day or whenever I could, which was more than frequently, but just this idea now of distance learning and knowing that there were many teachers who sometimes were the only stable thing in my life on a daily basis, the one thing that I could count on, right, is in terms of stability and structure, and with that being absent, right? So I think when this is over, and I'm glad you said it, we need to ask them each time, how are you feeling? I have a chart that I have where they can sort of, and I know they use it a lot in elementary, but I still use it in high school, a chart that just simply, hey, how are you feeling? They can point to it, or they can draw the picture. And as you know, that helps for them just to be able to emote or to express what it is they're feeling. Just it helps to bring them to be a part of the community, that they know someone else is concerned about that, and they get a chance to express and let that out. So I was going to say, I think when this is all said and done, you know, there may be a period of time where we need to have some, you know, support services, mental support services, not only for students, but for teachers as well, because it's a traumatic, life-altering situation. And I'm also looking forward to the good that may come from this, right? There's a lot of good that we can do in this situation. It's still fairly new, and it's uncertainty. But as we get into it more and we find out different ways to solve problems and address issues, maybe there's some good that's going to come out of this.
Well, our school systems have been in a period where we've been moving towards increasing our testing and reducing our play time and reducing all of our enrichment, such as art and music. Things have become even just more and more rigid. And so right now, everything's just being blown out. There's no state testing happening this year. Everything's completely changing. We're having to start from basically scratch. And it may not be a terrible thing at all, because now's a good time for us to step back and reanalyze what we've been doing and think about what's essential, what's really, really important, and what do we need to do, and what is just, busy work, what's just been ridiculous and unessential. And I think we're being given a lot of leeway right now. We're able to ask really difficult questions at the same time, and hopefully, I agree with you. I'm very optimistic that some really good things are going to come out of this. For sure, we're all going to be way, way better at the technology. I am so lazy when it comes to technology. I hate learning anything new. And so I haven't set up my Google Classroom. That was just, I thought that was a silly thing to have to do for a kindergartner. But now I'm realizing, okay, maybe I should have spent more time on this before. And I'm being forced to now, and that's not a bad thing.
No, not at all. I mentioned earlier in this show that I know there are some teachers who are not used to this, and personally, I've been using the online platform for quite a while for students that may have been on independent study, or just for students that may not be able to attend class. I've always tried to make things accessible and available to them, so it's not a difficult transition for some. But I definitely understand how difficult and intricate it can be for others who haven't. It reminds me right now, before the public school systems shut down, the university where I teach, we transitioned to distance learning. And so I'm doing all this online with my students. And I had one of the students, she had to, or they all had to deliver their lessons, that they had to plan lessons in a unit and deliver them. Well, they had to do it online now, and everything was distance learning. And one of the students she wasn't up in arms, but she was concerned that she thought, wow, I'm not used to doing this online, and I don't know how to do this, and we shouldn't have to do this because I'm not going to be an online teacher. I'm going to be in the classroom. And I said, wait a minute now. I said, many of us are online teachers already, and that may be a component that you may have to, implement in the future. So this is not bad practice for you. And then just, 2 weeks after that, the entire state or maybe the entire country went to distance learning. And so now, it became evident to her that maybe, this is not a bad thing for her to practice this now. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. There's a lot of home schools and charter schools and online one-on-one kind of programs where teachers have already been doing online classes and, different formats. The public school system where we go to school each day and see our students each day is not the only model that's out there. There's lots of other ways of delivering instruction to students. And I used to actually teach English to Chinese kids in the middle of the night when I was struggling and I was working like 4 jobs while I was in school. And it was really fun. I had my little online classroom. I had a little background. I would make it really fun and engaging. So that gave me kind of a little bit of experience of what it's like to teach students that are nowhere near you and don't even speak the same language.
Sure.
You have to use a lot of body language, a lot of gestures. You have to use a lot of visuals. And we already have to do that when we're dealing with kids who have speech difficulties or learning difficulties. They need us to use everything in our toolkit to teach them. And, that's even more so when you're dealing with a kid that's not physically present. You're going to have to become a little bit of a theater performer. Unfortunately, sorry people, if you're introverted and you're not used to that, you're going to have to try and be just a little bit more silly, use a little bit more of this crazy personality that you have probably lying dormant somewhere inside of you, because it's going to help right now. It's really going to help, and it's going to be fun. I really believe that it can be really fun.
Definitely. I think so. I think a lot of teachers are going to be surprised at how fun it can be. You spoke about teaching Chinese students, or just really quick, my very first teaching, well, it wasn't my first teaching assignment, but one of my first assignments in my new district, it was a Sadai class, specially designed academic instruction in English. And the majority of the students in that class spoke no English at all. And I had to teach them world history. And I had students from China, India, Korea, Germany, Colombia, Puerto Rico, where else? East LA, and a few other countries, and hardly any of them spoke English. So like you said, you have to be creative. So I had to be a performer, and I had to use realia and manipulatives and pictures and drawing and acting. And it really was a unique class. And it was such a thrill, because those students at the end, this is back when we had STAR testing, they performed just as well as any other class, if not better, on STAR testing, because they were really engaged and they wanted to know the material. So it can be fun. It's a challenge, but it can be fun. And I think that can trickle down and really invigorate and enliven the students in the situations that we have currently going on. It definitely is essential. So bring out all the fun, you teachers and anyone else listening. Bring out the fun, bring out the old personality that may have been left dormant, right?
There's a lot of really good things about distance learning, too. I mean, we don't have to deal with our kids needing to go to the bathroom or us needing to go to the bathroom. We don't need to deal with, them having accidents or anything of that nature. We don't have to clean up after them anymore. So, there's a lot of positives to look at. It's hard to look at the positive right now because we're all kind of in shock.
No, it is hard. It is. No, but I think go ahead.
No, I think once the reality settles in, I think we'll feel like it's not so bad.
Oh, sure. Yeah, we're resilient, and like you said, it's hard to think about now, and rightfully so. I mean, there's so many families again in flux and in different situations, so there's a lot. But I think as we go into it and it becomes the new norm, and people have kind of gotten used to the routine, we're anticipating things to get better. But again, going back to your point about there's some good things, or I don't know if it was my point. There's some good. It's our point. How about that? Some good things coming that will come from this, right? Different ways to look at education. What things are essential? Do we really need to do so much testing, right? What exactly should 21st century learning look like? Before it's been so top down before. I think now, especially as you said, you are the liaison right now between your district or the admin and your classes, and our admin are tasked with so many other things that it's essential that teachers are those liaisons. And so I think a lot of the change is going to come from where it should anyway, and in some cases it does, but a lot of it is going to come from the teachers' input as to what this looked like, how we as teachers are able to assess it and to make the necessary adjustments, because in our situation we're on the front lines, and so I think that's definitely going to be a part of this new way that we approach and think about education for sure.
Yeah, it's an unprecedented opportunity to grow and to learn and to change things for the better. And if we view it as such, I think we can look at it as just an amazing opportunity instead of looking at it as such a difficult burden, because it is hard, it is difficult, but it's also really open and full of possibility and full of a chance for us to do something really, really great and new. And I love that because we've been told for so long we've got to do everything exactly a certain way. And now we are given some loose parameters and being asked to run with it.
Right. It reminds me a bit of the time period when we transitioned here in California. We had what's called the STAR test. It was the state exams that students took. And when we transitioned from that to Common Core, there was a period of time, at least for in social science, where it was new territory and it was uncharted, and you really got a chance to be creative and really got a chance to teach and express the love that you have for your subject area before things became a little bit more regimented, which is where we started to go again. And now this dynamic is going to shift that again to where, as you said, you really get a chance to be innovative. And I just, again, hope that our educational leaders and decision makers and other stakeholders take heed and listen to the teachers and reflect upon the students' experiences to really transform our system. We're about at the end of our show, but I really do want to say that I appreciate you coming on to the show and sharing some information. And I just want to give an opportunity, if you have any last items you'd like to share with our audience or topics that you want to throw out there.
Well, I like what you said about the love, because we do what we do because we love it and because we love our students. And that's ever so apparent at this time right now. And so I just want to encourage everyone out there that's listening to continue to do what they do with so much love. And that love will be enough. Don't be too hard on yourselves, because we have to give each other a lot of leeway at this time. And if there's anything I can do to help.
You're breaking up just a bit. Hold on.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you so much for having me on the show, and continue to work hard every day and do what you do, and give yourself a little slack right now, because it's not easy, and what you're doing is a lot more than you signed up for. And if there's anything I can do to help, I'm always happy to.
That's so very much appreciated. To our listeners, if you have further questions or comments for Ruthemma Rush, please email them to letschewthegum@gmail.com, and we'll be sure to forward them to her. You've been listening to Let's Chew the Gum, the podcast where we talk about everything from A to Z. You can find our podcast right here where you're listening, or also on Spotify, YouTube, Spreaker, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Anchor, and so many other social platforms. Hit us up on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Hellonis, and others. We thank you so much for listening. We ask that you come back next time, and remember, we always have
Something for your mind. Something for your mind.
Let's smile together.
Something for your mind.
무엇인가 정신을 집어넣으세요. 어떤 것 필요합니까?
Something for your
정신을 집어넣으세요.
mind.